In this video, I'm ranking every single Tupac album from worst to best, including the posthumous releases, the group projects, and everything in between. And before anyone hits the comments, yes, I know Pac didn't have creative control over the posthumous albums, but that doesn't impact my ranking here. I'm judging strictly off the music, the quality, the replay value, the production choices, the performances, nothing else. With that out of the way, let's jump straight into the list.
Baby, don't cry. Hope you got your head up. Even when the road is hard, never give up. Baby, don't.
Starting off at the bottom of the ranking is Still I Rise, the collaboration album between Tupac and the Outlawz. And I'm just going to be honest, this album is extremely boring to me. The overall style from both Pac and the Outlawz is really basic and repetitive. Lyrically, there's nothing impressive happening, and the subject matter becomes tedious fast. Motivational struggle anthems can hit hard when they're done right, but on this album, it feels like the same story told the exact same way over and over again. The harsh realities of the streets, the environment that shaped them, the choices that turned them into thugs. That topic itself isn't the issue, it's the lack of creativity in how they approach it. The flows rarely change, the energy feels flat, and the songs start blending together. It's like hearing the same track on repeat with slightly different wording, and that's the biggest problem. There's no real evolution or stylistic switch-ups across the album. It just doesn't bring anything new to the table, especially compared to the depth and versatility Pac showed on his stronger releases. But to be fair, the album isn't completely without highlights. Some tracks do stand out, mostly because of the production and the hooks sung by featured vocalists. And there's one moment where Pac and the Outlawz actually switch their approach, and it works extremely well. The song Teardrops and Closed Caskets is easily the best concept on the project. The way they trade off verses, with each member of the Outlawz vividly telling a different part of a tragic story, shows what this album could have been. The chemistry is tight, the writing is stronger, and the emotion feels real. If they had carried that same creative energy across the entire track list, this album would have been on a completely different level.
It's like they celebrate the dead and wish they could die.
So peep the lesson. But wait a minute, back to Precious.
For me, Still I Rise doesn't offer anything I'd come back to, especially when so many of these themes and flows were already done better on earlier tracks from Pac and the Outlawz. Overall, it's a tedious listen and easily the weakest entry in his catalog.
Perhaps I was addicted to the dark side. Somewhere inside my childhood when this my heart died. And even though we both...
Next up, at number 11, we have Until the End of Time, Tupac's third posthumous album. And once again, we're dealing with a project that suffers heavily from questionable production and lackluster performances. For an album released in 2001, the instrumentals definitely sounded modern at the time, but listening to it today, they're extremely dated. And that's one of the biggest issues. The production feels stuck between eras. It tries to modernize Pac's vocals, but ends up clashing with his style instead of complementing it. Pac himself doesn't help much either. Across the majority of this project, he's still locked into that same underdeveloped flow and repetitive subject matter we already heard countless times before his passing. The themes don't evolve, the delivery rarely switches, and the runtime makes everything feel even more exhausting. This album is long, and not in a way that adds depth, more like in a way that makes you check the track list to see how many songs are left. And yes, I'm fully aware Pac had zero creative control here, but honestly, the people who did have control didn't make the best decisions either. Most of this album blends together to the point where it feels like you're listening to the same track on loop with slight variations. The Outlawz don't help the situation either. Their appearances add even more mediocrity to a track list already struggling to stay engaging. Their verses often drag the songs down rather than elevate them, and it just contributes to the overall monotony. But despite all of that, there are some bright spots. The title track, Until the End of Time, is easily one of the few moments where everything clicks. Pac sounds passionate, the beat fits him perfectly, and R.L. Hugger's vocals on the hook bring a level of emotion and polish the rest of the album desperately needed. Even the Outlawz have a couple small highlights, well, technically one, on You Don't Have to Worry. Their performances weren't anything special, but the instrumental was so creative and catchy that it carried the whole track. And then there's Last Ones Left, which is genuinely a strong collaboration between Pac and the Outlawz. The production is energetic, everyone sounds locked in, and it feels like the kind of track the rest of the album should have been aiming for.
When we blunted up and swerving, back in the suburban, screaming outlaw, running on the curb. They never try me 'cause
Unfortunately, those few standout songs aren't enough to save the project. As a whole, Until the End of Time is a boring, bloated listening experience with very little replay value. The highs are high for sure, but the lows, and there are a lot of them, make this one of Pac's weakest albums in his catalog.
say the blacker the better, the sweeter the juice. I say the darker the flesh and the deeper the roots.
Coming in at number 10 is Strictly For My Ends, an album that shows both the strengths and the weaknesses of a young Tupac, still figuring out how to balance activism, anger, vulnerability, and entertainment. This project is bold, politically charged, and full of passion, but it's also weighed down by inconsistency and some clear signs of an artist still developing. The album starts off with pure fire. Holler If You Hear Me is explosive, fueled by an incredible instrumental and some of Pac's most aggressive delivery. The problem is that he's basically shouting at full volume the entire time, which can make the track feel overwhelming instead of impactful. Pac's theme slows things down for a moment and sets up the reflective lens through which Pac wants you to view the album, a raw expression of the pain, frustration, and resilience within his community. But the cracks start showing early. Songs like Point the Finger and Peep Game suffer from repetitive flows and subject matter that Pac had already touched on multiple times, even this early in his career. The intentions are strong, but the creativity doesn't always keep up. The album gets much stronger when Pac leans into storytelling and emotional honesty. Something to Die For is a perfect example. Pac opens up about a tragic real-life incident that made him reassess jealousy, hate, and the cycle of violence in his community. Then you get Last Words with Ice Cube and Ice-T, and the energy shoots right back up. The beat is hard, the chemistry is there, and all three rappers snap. It's one of the best posse cuts Pac ever recorded. Soldier's Revenge is another standout, where Pac experiments with vocal effects and taps into a militant charged energy, but that momentum falls apart with Struggling, a track that completely misses the mark due to confusing performances and weak production.
Now we gotta eat, gotta make ends. Never get a penny, he just hard on the fucking streets. Like a man.
From there, the album keeps bouncing between intensity and repetition. Tracks like Guess Who's Back and Representing 93 have strong moments, but they also highlight how often Pac fell back on the same ideas and flows during this era. And then, the classic, Keep Your Head Up. No matter how you feel about the album as a whole, this track is undeniable. Pac speaks directly to women, especially single mothers, with a level of empathy and warmth that cuts through the noise. The message is powerful, the emotion is real, and Dave Hollister's vocals over that Be Alright sample turn it into one of Pac's greatest songs ever made. Yes, some of the lyrics feel contradictory when compared to his other tracks, but the impact of the song can't be denied.
If I holler to my sisters on welfare, Tupac kids, if don't nobody else care.
The title track Strictly For My Ends and The Streets Are Death Row bring things back into Pac's street-level perspective, mixing loyalty, paranoia, and survival with some solid production. Then I Get Around flips the mood completely, showing Pac's fun, playful side. It's catchy, it's energetic, and it's one of his most iconic party records, even if it does stand in direct contradiction to the values he preaches on Keep Your Head Up. The emotional swing continues with Papa's song, where Pac vents his frustration and lingering pain toward his absent father. But although the concept is great, I don't like the performances and production overall. And finally, Five Deadly Venoms closes the album on a decent but inconsistent note, with mixed performances from the guest artists that don't quite match the intensity of the earlier features. Overall, Strictly For My Ends is a passionate, ambitious album that captures both Pac's brilliance and his contradictions. The highs are incredibly high, powerful, emotional, and socially aware, but the lows expose the uneven delivery, repetitive themes, and lack of polish. It's an important album in his catalog, but definitely not one of his most cohesive.
A place to spend my quiet nights, time to unwind, so much pressure in this life of mine. I cried times I once.
At number 9, we have Better Days, Tupac's fourth posthumous album. If you've listened to his previous posthumous projects, this one will feel familiar, but with some improvements. The production on this album is a noticeable step up, giving the songs more polish and a more modern sound. Unfortunately, in terms of style, Tupac doesn't really evolve. He raps about the same topics he always has, and the flow rarely changes, which makes large parts of the album feel repetitive and frankly boring at times. The overarching theme is clear: Tupac giving hope to black communities struggling against systemic oppression and the harsh realities of life in the streets. It's a noble message, but it's been the same message he's delivered on hundreds of other tracks, which adds to the sense of monotony. And sadly, the Outlaws continue to drag the project down. Their verses feel lackluster and add little to the energy or emotion of the tracks, which just reinforces the repetitive vibe. Despite these issues, Better Days isn't without its highlights. Jazzy Faye's contributions really stand out, especially on Fair Exchange and You Can Call, where his smooth instrumentals and singing vocals lift the tracks and make them enjoyable listens.
Dear baby, you the picture of perfection. Straight from the $1 million smile to my attraction to your complexion. complexion.
Tupac himself shines on tracks like Thug Mansion and My Block, delivering passionate, heartfelt performances that remind you why his voice and presence were so impactful. Overall, Better Days is a solid step up from his previous posthumous releases. The production is stronger, and there are definite moments where Tupac's energy and emotion break through, but at the end of the day, the album still suffers from repetitive themes, predictable flows, and uninspired contributions from the Outlaws. It's an improvement, but it's far from perfect.
Started with 5 shots, niggas plotting to kill him. Never figured that same nigga sell 5 million, hit the charts.
At number 8, we have Pac's Life, Tupac's final posthumous album. If you've been following the pattern with his later posthumous releases, you probably already know what to expect. Unfortunately, it's more of the same. Tupac's style hasn't evolved, and his subject matter remains repetitive. The main thing that keeps this album from being completely forgettable is the production and the featured artists, who managed to bring some life and variety to the tracks. The production on this album is solid, giving many of the tracks a modern, polished sound, and there are moments where the feature performers really shine. For example, Play Your Cards Right Female features Keisha Cole, whose melodic, infectious vocals completely steal the spotlight. The male version, Play Your Cards Right Male, showcases strong chemistry between Ludacris and Tupac, and it's one of the more enjoyable tracks here.
Tonight is love making, take you any place you wish. Today we satisfied, yesterday was stolen kisses.
Another highlight is the Pac's Life remix, where Snoop Dogg and T.I. pay homage to Pac, reflecting on his influence and the impact he left behind. These moments are genuinely enjoyable and remind listeners of the legacy Pac built. But beyond these highlights, the album largely falls into a predictable formula. Most tracks feel like they're trying to recreate the magic of earlier Tupac songs, and his underdeveloped flows and repetitive lyrical themes come through clearly. There's not much that surprises or challenges the listener, which makes the overall experience somewhat forgettable. In conclusion, Pac's Life is a decent posthumous effort with a few standout tracks and impressive guest features, but it ultimately suffers from the same issues as many of his later releases: uninspired flows, repetitive topics, and a reliance on outside performers to carry the energy. It's enjoyable in parts, but not essential listening for the casual or even dedicated Tupac fan.
As soon as I leave the house, you wanna page me. See, you got me trapped, I'm going crazy, this is slavery.
At number 7, we have Loyal to the Game, Tupac's 5th posthumous release. This one is noticeably different from his earlier posthumous albums, mostly for the better. While Tupac himself is still delivering the same style and concepts as usual, repetitive flows, familiar themes, what makes this album stand out is the creativity of the production. Eminem produced almost the entire project, and he brings some unique touches that make many of the tracks more engaging than they might have been otherwise. Eminem's production is inventive, particularly in the way he manipulates Tupac's vocals. He creatively adds shoutouts to Pac himself, G-Unit, and Obi Trice, giving the tracks a sense of connection to the contemporary rap scene at the time. And speaking of G-Unit, several instrumentals lean into their aesthetic, which fits Pac's gangster rap persona exceptionally well. Tracks like Soldier Like Me and the title track Loyal to the Game, featuring 50 Cent, Young Buck, and Lloyd Banks, are perfect examples. Another standout is Hennessy, where Obi Trice's vocals blend seamlessly with Pac's verses over a catchy, memorable instrumental. It almost feels like Tupac and Obi were in the studio together. The chemistry is that strong.
They wanna know who's my role model. It's in the brown bottle.
Yo, what's the motherfucking motto, nigga?
That said, not everything here works. The majority of the album still suffers from the same repetitive flows and subject matter that made previous posthumous albums feel tiring. Tupac's rhymes are basic, and without creative production to elevate them, they quickly start to feel monotonous. In conclusion, Loyal to the Game is a decent posthumous album. Eminem's inventive production and a few standout tracks make it enjoyable, but it still carries many of the same flaws of Pac's earlier posthumous releases: repetitiveness and underdeveloped lyrical content.
How long will they move it? Yeah, it's for my nigga Kato.
At number 6, we move away from posthumous material to Thug Life, Volume 1, a group project from Thug Life, the collective featuring Tupac, Big Syke, Mopreme Shakur, Macadocious, and Rated R. This album is interesting because the members' styles blend well on certain tracks, giving the group a unique identity beyond just Pac's influence. Each member has a distinct flow, which provides variety and adds some depth to the project. That said, there are some noticeable flaws. Several tracks feel repetitive, both in subject matter matter and delivery. Pac dominates the majority of the tracks, and his familiar flows and themes often overshadow the other members. He even has 2 solo tracks on the album, which further limits the opportunity for the other members to shine and interrupts the group dynamic. Despite these shortcomings, the album has standout moments that highlight the group's potential. How Long Will They Mourn Me is a major highlight. Every member delivers heartfelt performances reflecting on the loss of fallen comrades. There are other moments where the group's chemistry is strong, and their styles complement one another, but over the course of the album, it starts to feel repetitive. It's easy to imagine how this group could have ended up like the Outlaws, rappers overshadowed by repetition and lack of evolution. Overall, Thug Life Volume 1 is a fairly good album. It has strong performances and shows glimpses of the group's potential, but it's weighed down by Pac's dominance and repetitive themes.
Machiavellian is Illuminati all through your body. The blows like a 12 gauge.
At number 5, we have the Don Killuminati, The 7 Day Theory, Tupac's first posthumous album. This project is often hailed as a classic, but for me, there are definite flaws. One of the main issues is that Tupac's later posthumous albums, including this one, often lean heavily on production and guest features to carry the tracks, and sometimes it doesn't fully work. On this album, the Outlaws are featured heavily, but unfortunately, their contributions often fall flat. Their rhymes are basic, their flows lack energy, and they simply don't match Pac's intensity. On iconic tracks like Hail Mary, it's clear that Pac is the driving force. The Outlaws' verses, in my opinion, don't add much to the song, and they're largely forgettable compared to the raw power of Tupac's delivery. Another notable flaw is Pac's repetitiveness. By this stage, his style is starting to feel underdeveloped. He tends to stick with similar flows and topics, cycling through the same street narratives, revenge themes, and existential reflections that he'd been exploring for years. It's not that the content is bad, Pac's energy is undeniable, but over the course of the album, it can feel monotonous. You start to notice the patterns in his delivery, the familiar cadences, and the recurring subject matter, which makes the project feel less fresh than his earlier work. Despite these shortcomings, the Don Killuminati still contains standout moments that make it worth listening to. Tracks like Bomb First showcase Pac at his most intense, combining aggressive lyrics with haunting production that perfectly matches the dark, urgent tone of the album.
Allow me to introduce Machiavelli is gone. Spiritual lyrics like the Holy Quran.
Even within the repetitive structure, you can hear glimpses of Pac's brilliance, the raw emotion, the fearless honesty, and the way he commands the mic. In conclusion, the Don Killuminati The 7 Day Theory is a good album, but it's definitely flawed. It highlights Pac's unmatched talent, but it also exposes the weaknesses of relying too much on guest features and repetitive flows.
I should have seen you was trouble right from the start. Taught me so many lessons, how not to mess with broken hearts. So many.
Coming in at number 4 is Are You Still Down? Remember Me, Tupac's second posthumous release. This album is one of the stronger posthumous projects, thanks largely to better production and a more cohesive structure that allows the songs to flow smoothly from start to finish. The instrumentals are well crafted and complement Pac's vocals in a way that helps keep even repetitive themes engaging. Compared to earlier posthumous releases, this album feels more deliberate and polished, which makes it easier to listen to from start to finish. That said, Pac's style is still a bit repetitive on these pre-recorded tracks. He rarely experiments with different flows, and the majority of the album focuses on 2 recurring themes, reflecting on past struggles or speaking on the need for peace and change in the world. While both topics are classic Pac, they can become tedious over multiple tracks, especially when the production isn't enough to offset the repetition. Still, Tupac has a knack for crafting hooks that stick, and his energy and emotion pull listeners in even when the subject matter isn't new. One of the highlights of this album is 16 on Death Row, which is a masterclass in storytelling. Pac paints a vivid picture of life under pressure, giving listeners an intimate look into the streets and the struggles of young black men during that era.
Dear mama, I'm caught up in this sickness. I robbed my adversaries, but slipped and left a witness.
Only Fear of Death is another standout, showcasing his reflective side as he explores mortality and the uncertainty of what comes after life, themes that resonate deeply with his fans. Other memorable tracks include I Wonder If Heaven Got a Ghetto and Do For Love, both of which balance catchy hooks with thoughtful lyricism and solid performances. These tracks demonstrate that even when Pac repeats themes, he can elevate them with emotion, delivery, and clever phrasing.
Making D's was my mission. Moving up for this shit to get my mama out the kitchen, and why must I?
In conclusion, Are You Still Down? Remember Me is a strong posthumous album that showcases Tupac's talent and storytelling ability. While there are still noticeable flaws, flaws, particularly repetitive flows and familiar subject matter, the well-structured songs, great production, and Pac's ability to command a track make this one of his more compelling posthumous releases. It's an album that rewards multiple listens, and it's a solid reminder of why Tupac's music remains influential years after his passing.
Back in elementary, I thrived on misery. Left me alone, I grew up amongst a dime breed.
Coming in at number 3 is Me Against the World, one of Tupac's most personal and emotionally charged albums. This project finds Pac at a critical point in his life, dealing with a highly publicized court case, negative media attention, and reflecting on the hardships he endured growing up. That tension fuels some of his most passionate performances, and you can hear it in every track. The album feels like a window into Pac's mind during one of the most tumultuous periods of his life, and that raw honesty is what makes it so compelling. There are multiple standout tracks that really showcase this. So Many Tears is a perfect example. Pac reflects on the people he's lost to gun violence and the emotional toll it's taken on him. His delivery is somber, introspective, and gripping, perfectly complemented by the haunting production. Then there's Dear Mama, which is widely regarded as one of his greatest songs. On this track, Pac delivers a heartfelt performance, showing deep appreciation for his mother and the sacrifices she made to raise him. The combination of thoughtful lyrics, a memorable hook, and emotional vocal delivery makes it an unforgettable moment in his catalog.
When I was young, me and my mama had beef. 17 years old, kicked out on the streets.
The album also benefits from strong supporting vocals from singers, which elevate the emotional impact of the tracks. These contributions help Pac's stories hit even harder and give the album a richness that stays with you long after listening. That said, Me Against the World isn't perfect. Some tracks reveal the flaws that had begun to appear in Pac's style by this point. He rarely switches up his flow, and the subject matter can feel repetitive, mostly focused on his hardships, struggles, and personal reflection. A track like Lord Knows highlights this issue. While it's still a solid song, the monotony of his delivery and familiar themes makes it less memorable over repeated listens. The tracks aren't bad by any means, but compared to the highs of So Many Tears and Dear Mama, they lack the same replay value. Despite these minor flaws, this is still a really strong album. The combination of passionate performances, emotional depth, and solid production makes it a standout in Pac's catalog. Me Against the World captures a very human side of Tupac, one that's raw, reflective, and intensely relatable, and that's why it remains one of his most enduring albums.
Out on bail, fresh out of jail, California dreaming. Soon as I step on the scene, I'm hearing hoochie screaming.
At number 2, we have All Eyes on Me, Tupac's magnum opus, and one of the defining albums of his career. Right from the opening tracks, his energy is absolutely otherworldly. It feels like he had something to prove, and he delivers consistently on every song. Pac's performances are full of intensity, charisma, and passion, which makes this double album feel unstoppable. The production on All Eyes on Me is a huge part of why it works so well. The instrumentals are hard-hitting, polished, and perfectly tailored to Pac's voice. From aggressive bangers to smoother, more melodic tracks, the beats always complement his style. The guest appearances also play a significant role, enhancing the listening experience without overshadowing Pac. My favorite moments are the R&B features, which bring out a melodic richness that contrasts beautifully with Pac's grittier delivery. KC and JoJo on How Do You Want It and Danny Boy on I Ain't Mad at Chuck provide unforgettable hooks that elevate the songs to another level. One of the most impressive aspects of this album is Pac's ability to tackle a multitude of themes and concepts. He raps about everyday life, struggles in the streets, loyalty, love, and betrayal, while sharing his perspective in a way that remains both fascinating and deeply personal. Tracks like California Love and Ambitions as a Writer show his playful, larger-than-life side, while All Eyes on Me and Trading War Stories balance that with raw, confident storytelling.
The Kenyan mom picture, a thug nigga drinking hard liquor. This ghetto life got me catching up to God.
Even on tracks that could have been repetitive, Pac's delivery keeps them compelling. That said, there are minor drawbacks. Some songs are ruined by guest features, and it's clear that Tupac doesn't necessarily need outside rap verses. His voice and flow are powerful enough to carry entire tracks on their own. But even with a few weaker guest spots, the album remains monumental. In conclusion, All Eyes on Me is a masterclass in Tupac's artistry. It captures his hunger, passion, and versatility at their peak. From hard-hitting street anthems to smooth melodic hits, this album proves why Tupac was one of the most compelling voices in hip-hop history. For anyone exploring his legacy, this is an essential listen. Topping my list at number 1 is Tupacalypse Now, Tupac's groundbreaking debut album, and for good reason. From the very first track, Pac comes out swinging, establishing himself as a voice of a generation. Even at the start of his career, he had an infectious energy and engaging flow that immediately set him apart from other rappers at the time. This wasn't just an introduction to a new artist, it was a bold statement that Tupac was here to speak truth to power. What makes Tupacalypse Now so remarkable is its combination of socially conscious storytelling and raw emotion. This is an album that doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of life in marginalized communities. Tracks like Trapped dive headfirst into the struggles of living under systemic oppression. In this song, Pac details the frustrations of being cornered by a corrupt government, the pressures of the streets, and the mental toll of being constantly surveilled and judged by society. It's the kind of storytelling that makes you feel like you're right there with him, experiencing every setback and injustice firsthand.
You know they got me trapped in this prison of seclusion. Happiness living on the streets is a delusion.
Pac also shines on deeply personal and emotional tracks like Brenda's Got a Baby. Here he tells the story of a young girl forced into adult responsibilities far too early, highlighting the intersection of poverty, neglect, and systemic failure. His narrative is compassionate yet unflinching, showing both the harsh realities of her world and the resilience required to survive it. Songs like this showcase Pac's ability to merge storytelling with activism, making his music not just entertaining, but deeply meaningful.
I hear Brenda's got a baby, but Brenda's barely got a brain. A damn shame, the girl can hardly spell.
But what's impressive about Tupacalypse Now is that it's not heavy all the way through. Pac balances the political and social commentary with high-energy head-nodding tracks that show his versatility as an artist. Songs with a more aggressive hype energy allow Pac to demonstrate his lyrical skills and charisma, keeping the album dynamic and engaging. This mix of socially conscious tracks and more playful, aggressive songs gives the project a unique balance, making it both thought-provoking and instantly listenable. Another key strength of this album is the early glimpse it provides into Tupac's signature style, his combination of passion, urgency, and raw honesty. Even when he's tackling similar themes to those he would explore throughout his career, there's an immediacy to his voice here that grabs your attention. His delivery is commanding, his emotion palpable, and his ability to convey the struggles of his community feels authentic and urgent. Finally, Tupacalypse Now is historically significant. It wasn't just an album, it was a cultural statement. At a time when hip-hop was increasingly commercialized, Pac reminded listeners that rap could be both socially conscious and entertaining. This debut set the stage for everything he would go on to do, from the introspective tracks on Me Against the World to the larger-than-life bangers on All Eyes on Me. It's raw, it's passionate, and it's unforgettable. In conclusion, Tupacalypse Now is a phenomenal debut album. From hard-hitting social commentary to energetic, engaging tracks, this album proves why Tupac became an icon. It's a reminder of his ability to tell stories that matter, make you feel something, and demand your attention, all while laying the foundation for a legendary career in hip-hop. For anyone looking to understand the roots of Tupac's artistry, there's no better place to start. And there you have it, my full ranking of every Tupac album, from his posthumous releases all the way back to his debut. Looking at his discography as a whole, it's clear why Tupac is considered one of the greatest artists in hip-hop history. Even with some repetitive flows or uneven posthumous projects, his passion, storytelling, and energy remain the highlight. Whether it's the socially conscious fire of Tupacalypse Now, the raw emotion of Me Against the World, or the unstoppable energy of All Eyes on Me, there's something in his catalog for every type of listener. Posthumous albums like Better Days in Pac's life may have their flaws, but they still capture glimpses of his talent and enduring legacy. If you're a fan of hip-hop, these albums aren't just music, they're a window into Tupac's world, his struggles, and his vision. So, which Tupac album is your personal favorite? Or maybe you have a posthumous release you think deserves more love? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take. And as always, if you enjoyed this ranking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future content. Thanks for watching, and keep vibing to the music of one of the greatest to ever do it.